everybody? Welcome back to the HCT Winter Championship. I'm TJ, joined by the Admiral. That's admirable.
I'm dancing.
You are dancing away, my friend.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because we're in the top 8.
It's in the top 8, and you want to know another reason why?
Well, why I'm dancing or why we're in the top 8?
Both.
Hit me with it.
Because we're about to send another player to the World Championship.
Woo!
Yeah, it's going to be Roger versus Definition.
I'm a bad
And
dancer.
since, unlike a couple of the other quarterfinal matchups, neither of these players have qualified for the World Championship.
What? That's unusual.
It is unusual. It seems like it is. So the winner of this matchup will go on to Worlds. But this is a very, very, very difficult matchup for Definition, and there's one reason why.
I see a lot of reasons why. Why don't you tell me your one reason?
I see one glaring reason why, and
Okay.
that's that Definition has Odd Warrior, and Roger has 4 decks that do, well, okay, 3 decks that do very well against Odd Warrior, and one of those is banned.
Correct. I do agree that this is an extremely difficult matchup for Definition. I think ideally Definition would have banned something other than Death Rattle Hunter, but Roger's Death Rattle Hunter in particular is built super greedy. Double Nerubian Unraveler, double Charge Devilsaur, 1 copy of Candle Shot, no Mind Control Tech, double Stitch Tracker. His entire lineup has gone the full greed route against control decks. It is very much a control buster lineup, and even down to the Even Warlock, there's 2 Nerubian Unravelers in that one. It's a matchup that is definitely extremely difficult for Definition. But he does have some of his own cards that really can change the way a lot of this looks. And even down to the Odd Warrior in particular, he's brought a copy of Big Game Hunter. He's got an Azalina Soul Thief in here, and he's got 2 Faceless Manipulators with 2 Carnivorous Cubes. Definition has brought a slower lineup, but by the very metric of itself has gone a bit greedier on the choices as well. So there is a possibility that Definition gets through, but it's going to require some ingenuity and some good fortune if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that statement. But there is a weakness in Roger's lineup too, and I would say that it's the Even Warlock. It kind of, you know, doesn't fit super well into that lineup. We talk about Even Warlock as a 4th deck a lot, and how you can kind of tech it to be better against the things that you expect in the field. That's where the double Nerubian Unraveler comes in for Roger. But if there is a point of contention for Definition in this series, it's going to be trying to capitalize on that Even Warlock with all of his decks.
Right, and I really think that's where Roger may have forgotten one little thing, which was that if you're going to play a Control Buster lineup, Druid's definitely one of the decks you need to hit super hard. And he has not included a Skulking Geist in any of the decks that he's brought. The Death Rattle Hunter doesn't need that card. It's going to beat the crap out of Druid most of the time. Quest Rogue is a very aggressive deck, but he's only got 1 Fan of Knives in there. That's another way that you could suffer, is just 2 Spreading Plague setups where you have a limited number of Fan of Knives and aren't necessarily able to get the job done. He's not super worried about it because he's got Lab Recruiter in the Quest Rogue deck. But with that Even Warlock, there is no way to stop Naturalize from happening outside of Nerubian Unraveler and hope that the mana cost increase is going to stop Definition from having a clean turn. And when you have Naturalizes on the other side, you cannot play the game plan of blowing up the Naturalizes with Skulking Geist and then unleashing threats. That's not a possibility anymore. And so you have to play the Mountain Giants instead. It's still favorable for Roger, I would say, but there are some situations where he can get blown out by just a bunch of removal spells in a row.
Yeah, and the reason why we're talking about other matchups is because this one is one of the toughest for Definition. Does not have much agency in this game because Roger, now granted, he did struggle with a fatigue matchup yesterday with this deck specifically, but maybe didn't have fatigue in mind. With this one, you kind of have to, because you have that Lab Recruiter in the deck. He's already got Valera in his hand. The way you win this matchup is just complete attrition. You don't die, you infinite Lab Recruiter, you make your deck just basically Vicious Scale Hides, Lab Recruiters, and Elven Minstrels to be able to shuffle draw, and heal all along the way.
Yeah, I am a little bit curious to see what a card like Azalina could do in the matchup, because I have at times played Odd Warrior with Azalina in it and come pretty darn close to turning the corner on some of those situations. Definition doesn't have that in hand right now, but if he picks that up, you know, the timing of when that card hits is very important. it's difficult to really use properly, but there are some situations where you can do some shenanigans of your own with a card like that. And then also kind of rolling through these turns, Definition will have some pressure going. Has Direhorn Hatchling, has Carnivorous Cube, and that's usually enough to at least apply some pressure to Roger. And his deck doesn't handle mid-range minions that well. It just gives him a lot of time to be able to make quest progress. So could see an early Vanish as well, something that could be a +1 for Definition.
Yeah, like all the points you made, and I think early pressure is something that you mentioned, but something that's really important because you have to force the quest rogue to not play their ideal turns. But Roger has Sonya Shadow Dancer.
Right.
He's got Southsea Deckhand. He's got a way to complete the quest if he's not taking damage. So that's even more reason why Definition should try and go aggressive here.
That's really the juxtaposition of Quest Rogue, is you want to pressure it so it doesn't have its ideal turns, but one of its ideal turns is when you moderately pressure it. Very much like how Warrior does, moderately pressure. It's a weird situation to be in. Have at times been known to attack with Super Collider as well when I'm getting close to potentially killing my opponent. Definition, however, is not anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
It's a really strange feeling when you arrive at that point where you're like, am I really about to do this? And you think and you think and you go, all right, 5 mana Light's Justice it is.
Not even, because Light's Justice has an extra charge.
Oh gosh, it's even worse.
Yeah.
It does threaten a lot though.
And you know, I have to say that I am not 100% confident in Roger's Quest Rogue play. Reason being is because yesterday he played a matchup against Bunny Hopper. Bunny Hopper fatigued Roger with even Paladin. Now, it was fantastically played by Bunny Hopper, but with Lab Recruiter in your deck, that's almost never a situation you should find yourself in. And it was kind of just an unfortunate series for him overall. And I think he's got to kind of shake that off and try and focus on this. It's a much more linear game plan than even Paladin. You often don't necessarily have to worry about staying alive as much as against even Paladin, so you can focus on your win conditions and focus on making sure you're sequencing the late game with Lab Recruiters is on point.
That's really where my head comes in, is I think Roger had just never really run into that circumstance ever occurring, where fatigue certainly was not on his mind going into that matchup.
Oh. Definition plays the Zola on the Gluttonous Ooze.
Yes, the reason I like this is because Definition wants to have counterplay to Valera when it hits, and one of the things you can do is you can shut off Southsea Deckhand's charge effect by oozing the weapon after Valera has happened. You take away the weapon, and they can never make one again. So Roger, if he has to at some point use Stone Tusk Boar or loses that, the only thing he's relying on at that point is Southsea Deckhand for charge, which will lose it if the weapon's not there.
I don't think that's necessarily a big part of the win condition, though, is shutting off charge damage. Because the rogue can just go infinite if they play it correctly.
Well, what card in here is a big part of the win condition?
Shuffling a 5-mana 6/9 into your deck.
Which he just did.
He could have Zola'd the Direhorn Hatchling.
I like the ooze more.
Okay.
It's also just more efficient. Maybe you just play it now. Start beating them up. You
Okay.
get 5/5 from your Tank Master.
This is 8, 13, 16, 7. That's a lethal setup.
I mean, it's a Vanish.
Yeah, but
it's a lethal setup. That's probably exactly what Definition was thinking about.
yeah,
Not
he's
the
thinking
nonsense that I just
he's
said.
thinking his opponent's not going to really play any minions. He's going to be able to push a little bit of damage. He's going to Tinkmaster Overspark one of his minions into a Devilsaur. If that's what he was thinking, that's some next level stuff right there. That's some deep multi-turn math.
I'm going to add an asterisk next to what I said. I still mean it, but that's not what Definition was thinking about. He was thinking about beating him up if he got the right roll on.
Yeah, he was just thinking about, I'm going to do as much damage as possible. If I happen to piece together a lethal setup, cool. Quest complete.
Whoa, he's not vanishing.
He's going to take a lot of damage.
Well, now you've officially made me very interested in the game now.
Couple things to note about the way Roger has constructed this Quest Rogue deck. There is no Ziliax, which has been pretty much a staple in most Quest Rogue lists as of late. He's already used also one copy of the Vicious Scalehide, so his healing is limited in the deck. He does have Quest Complete. He's got a lot of bounce effects, still has Lab Recruiter, so he can get those shuffled back in. But that is something to note, is at this 4 health.
You cannot escape.
It's now 9.
This 9 health is 9 health for a while until he finds that second Vicious Scalehide with 17 cards left in deck.
It's the perfect card here. I'm not entirely certain.
Face is pretty darn good.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe Dr. Boom might have been the best card in Definition's deck at this point.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think there's a possibility it was, you know, something along the lines of Azalina, like trading in these, you know, atrocious-looking cards in your hand for, you know, just maybe something of substance. However, Azalina might not have been the best draw because it just could be so much better later on. Like, that's also a possibility. Roger is really being pushed into a situation where he needs to vanish, though. Like, I'm honestly kind of surprised he didn't vanish on the previous turn.
Yeah, well, he has to vanish here. He's dead if he doesn't. Unless this Mimic Pod picks up something that can stave off some of the pressure from the board.
So this is where you play the double Lab Recruiter then.
I want you and you.
I don't know. This is the position he found himself in yesterday. So playing the double Lab Recruiter earlier does just bank yourself fatigue early on in the game, but
it also makes your deck.
It also makes your average draw pretty weak, because unless he picks up Vicious Scalehide or Elven Minstrel, which are the 2 other cards that I like to shuffle in, then what if he draws a Lab Recruiter now?
I don't know, but Definition's beating down the door. I don't think I've ever really seen a game go quite seemingly this favorably. Oh, wow.
He has no minion pressure is
well,
the thing.
I mean, do you need minion pressure when you pick up a pair of saps from this?
But if you're having to sap against odd
I'm probably just prep Vanish again, honestly. Like, you've reached the point of the game where minions are now the most important thing. You have plenty of time to get tempo. It is a lot closer than I anticipated, though. Like, I do feel like I should be more excited than I am being right now, but it's just because it's rather anticlimactic, I guess, where it's just like, you're playing a 4-6 and a 5-5 at a time.
And Definition's just going to do it again.
Yeah, it's not exactly exciting, is I guess the reasoning. It's just kind of like, is this good enough? It's a check every turn. But this is where I now start getting a bit fearful for Definition. Is now it's you know, basically 2 more vanishes in Roger's hand with the Sap and the Valera card that you get every turn, the Shadow Reflection. Just copies, you know, whatever thing you last played.
Yeah.
Roger does still have a ways to go on actually killing Definition, though, too. So, you know, the fact that Definition's been so aggressive, it's going to force Roger into a position where he has to play defense.
Yeah.
And that's really what aggression buys you, is that disruption effect.
Honestly, with this pan out, even though there's 15 cards left in Roger's deck, I still think that this is a fatigue situation.
There's 3 Lab Recruiters still in the deck.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, his win condition isn't killing Definition. His win condition is get to the late game stages,
I see what you're saying.
Fend off his Direhorn Matriarchs, and eventually just run him out of cards.
Okay.
That's what I think his win condition is. So yes, it's fatigue, but Roger will, if he plays it correctly, never hit fatigue. The benefit of these saps as well is that he's burning cards from Definition.
Definition, it stops himself too. He's ready to deviate from the play, and instead hesitates and tells himself, hey, look, focus on this. This is a pretty important turn.
Yeah.
And definitely agree. Very important.
So Definition, the things that he has to keep in mind is, 1, needs to hold on to removal for when Vicious Scalehide comes down. Because if he removes Vicious Scalehide from the equation and Roger doesn't get to shuffle them back into his deck, then all healing is gone. And he can focus on, hey, if I get Dr. Boom and just start chipping away with the 3 damage hero power when I get it, or get some kind of immediacy with damage.
That Mimic Pod draw.
This is a big Mimic Pod.
Well, it's got another one coming too. So.
All right, South Sea Deckhand, that's good.
Sick.
Vicious Scalehide, maybe? Useful
Sick.
Brewmaster, okay.
Well, now Roger's probably on the let's figure out how to beat up my opponent plan.
Yeah. Still like Reckless Flurry that he has to worry about, but he can keep pushing damage to the face.
See Definition.
And brewing back.
The next sap gets played to the Mimic Pod sap. So that tells me Definition, you know, has not burdened himself with hand tracking, which is an extremely difficult thing when you have so many other things to focus on and the stakes that are in place. There's a lot of moving parts to the decks and the way they work. It lets me know that Definition has not been doing hand tracking, but is perhaps still hand reading. So that is a factor to consider as well.
Must choose soon.
Drink with me, friend.
So next turn, Roger has 16 damage lined up with South Sea Deckhand, Shadow Step, Youthful Brewmaster, and the Shadow Reflection.
Yep.
Draws one of those 6/9s. That takes 3 attacks to get through.
So there's no saps, no vanishes.
No saps, no vanishes.
So those are gone. Ooh. So Roger's got to get through these minions the old-fashioned way.
Now it takes 2 attacks to get through. And finds Zola. I think that Zola is probably going to be enough to start ending this.
Yeah, I can double South Sea Deckhand. Wait, no, yeah, he can double South Sea Deckhand. That Fan of Knives is the Shadow Reflections Fan of Knives, and then Zola back to still keep holding on to a charge minion. And
There's
still
a lot
have
of
that.
things here. I mean, that's really, again, when people talk about Quest Rogue, that's always like part of the beauty of Quest Rogue, is that there are just so many things you can do.
Such a perfect specimen.
So pretty pristine play so far.
It's hard for me to tell like what would have been better or worse because everything's looking just quite strong right now. You know, I think taking as much damage as he did, he certainly took a risk. If Definition had the weapon in play, he'd be working towards lethal because the Azalina can copy the South Sea Deckhand and the Zola and the Shadow Step, and the way it gets charged would be with a weapon. I think Definition should really have considered setting up the weapon this turn to think about that Azalina and how it interacts with charge versus what Roger's 9 life total is right now.
Yeah.
That's 2 attacks plus an attack of the Super Collider. He knows the Zola's there. He knows the South Sea Deckhand's there.
This is 17 damage available for Roger. So he's 1 damage off lethal, I believe. He can play South Sea Deckhand, Shadow Reflections to South Sea Deckhand. And then Zola plus a Shadow Step would be 16, 17 with the dagger.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really many minions left in the deck that are not, you know, Lab Recruiter, Novice Engineer, or those 2. So, you know, we just entered the territory where Definition's been close, but just not quite able to get there.
Wait. Was there a 2-turn lethal setup for Definition if he armors up and shield slams the Youthful Brewmaster and then just plays Azalina? Next turn, he Super Colliders.
Well, the Azalina overrides your Super Collider.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You'd have to play Super Collider first.
That's what I was thinking, too, is that the Super
Yeah.
Collider setup this turn puts Roger in a position where maybe he moves in on you.
Nah, the mana expenditure wouldn't be there. He knows that there's South Sea Deckhand plus Zola plus Shadow Reflections. He'd die over 2 turns. He wouldn't have enough health or mana to be able to make that happen. I don't
understand what you mean. If you go Armor, Shield Slam, Set, Super Collider, what change has been made?
because you can't Azalina the next turn and live without using the South Sea Deckhand to clear off the board that Roger had created.
Your opponent would be at 9 when you have a Super Collider set. So then you Azalina and you get Shadow Step and South Sea Deckhand.
Oh, you get Shadow Step. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
'Cause
Okay.
the idea is if you don't play anything, Roger doesn't necessarily need to play defense.
But he didn't know that the Shadow Step was there, whereas he did know that South Sea Deckhand and Zola were there.
True story. Very true story.
So for him, that's a big risk that he wasn't willing to take.
I I think at this point, this should have been a big risk that he is willing to take.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason right there is, like, you know, we've entered this the phase where does Roger even have a bad draw left in the deck?
Yeah.
And the answer is kinda, but no.
Yeah, but no. And Roger takes a pretty expected game 1 with Quest Rogue over the Odd Warrior, but man, it was close.
Yeah, I want to set the caveat to my statement of, you know, what feels like fairly harsh criticism, I guess, towards the end, that Definition did a fantastic job of putting Roger in a bad spot. That was a situation where Roger could have lost the game.
He had a lethal setup.
It's like, take that Mimic Pot out of the equation, and instead you draw Preparation.
Yeah.
Whoa, that turn looks way worse suddenly.
Yeah. Very close. That game was on a razor's edge, which is not always the case with Odd Warrior versus Quest Rogue. But, you know, we have to keep coming back to those 2 spotlighted decks. Even Warlock for Roger and Odd Warrior for Definition. Those are the 2 that we have to look at to get wins for this series to really start heating up. But for now, Roger, 1-0 lead over Definition, and we're going to see if he can continue that lead and book himself a spot at the World Championship right after this. HCT Winter Championship. Once again, I'm TJ, joined by the Admiral. That's Admirable.
Hi.
We're about to jump into game number 2 between Roger and Definition, and this is an uphill battle for Definition. He's going to struggle with that Odd Word throughout this whole series, and there's a lot of stakes here. The one shining light at the end of the very, very dark tunnel. Actually, it's a pretty short tunnel, and it's kind of filled with light. Because either way, they have a good chance of qualifying to the World Championship. Because of the tiebreaker situation, whoever loses this matchup also has another chance, and potentially even another chance, to qualify for Worlds, because Bloodyface and Bunny Hopper are already in the top 4. Which means out of 5th through 8th, there will only be 3 players that are fighting for 2 spots.
Did you just argue with yourself?
I did. That happens a lot.
Well, you got to stop, because they're going to take away my job if you don't have anyone to argue with.
Glad we're on the same page.
It's been TJ's secret plan all along.
Your soul shall be mine.
All right, well, we're going to jump into Druid versus Even Warlock. And as we had mentioned previously before the break, while Odd Warrior is the deck that Definition needs to find a win with, Even Warlock is that deck for Roger. His lineup otherwise just crushes Definition. But Even Warlock is that weak point.
We have turned our curse
I don't
into
know
our
if I was
strength.
looking at this wrong, but did Definition Mulligan naturalize? I feel like I had to have been looking at this wrong if that wasn't
so
the case.
The way you have to look at it in this matchup specifically, it is the Hikar Druid. So basically in the early game, all you want is just cycle. You just want to cycle through, because those naturalizes are actually crucial to the plan of the late game.
I do agree with that, but
Ooh, got the Gadgets and Auctioneer.
yeah, that one is super crucial. Admittedly, that is probably the most important card in the deck. It allows you to do some pretty disgusting things. If you haven't seen this actually happen before, there is effectively like a 3rd and 4th Auctioneer. It's just that you need Wild Pyromancer and you need Acolyte of Pain. You can do some pretty nasty stuff with the 0-cost spells and all these cyclers. And once you start getting through the deck, that's really where Roger finds himself in trouble. Because the Definition just drawn so many cards. Like, there's key cards in the deck, and once you reach them, you can often put your opponent in a tough position.
See, found the naturalize.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense, like, you know, right after I start thinking about it a bit, where you said you pretty much just want cycle, I was like, oh yeah, I guess if you just draw enough cards, that's way better than keeping it in the mulligan.
Yeah.
You know, still a pretty massive favorite to find one.
Because in that case, you get naturalized plus a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Would you rather have naturalized or naturalized plus a bunch of other stuff?
I'd rather have naturalized plus a bunch of other stuff, namely Auctioneer and, you know, the like. Now, I am a bit curious about Definition's actual attack on the last couple turns, where he is setting Roger closer to Hooked Reaver territory. I'm a bit surprised that Roger doesn't tap as a result of that, because oftentimes burning cards in the matchup means nothing, but getting yourself to 15 to play a Hooked Reaver means a lot. And so 2 taps in a row here, sure, Roger should be burning cards, but you know, what card in his deck is of vital importance at the moment?
I don't think Definition's going to go off with this naturalize here. That's my take. He can't play Innervate. I don't think so. Oh, he's got 2 Innervates, so he can play 1 Innervate.
I don't think I would do that. I think I would naturalize.
Okay, just naturalize and don't do anything else.
I'd probably branching pass as well.
Okay. That sets up for a reasonable turn next turn with Gadget and Auctioneer plus draw your entire deck.
Reasonable. That's what you call reasonable.
That's a pretty reasonable turn to me.
If you're going to gain armor from the branching pass, however, you're not going to naturalize. Because in that case, what you want to do is set the Gadget and Auctioneer, use the naturalize, the Spellstone, and the incidental fires and pounce and stuff you're going to have, and try to leverage your life total. Like, imagine if Roger had life tapped last turn. That would be a 7/7 with taunt instead. I think that's a big blunder from Roger to go, I don't want to burn a card.
I got the best deals anywhere.
Hold on to your butts. That's a Jurassic Park reference.
Oh.
You remember that scene? Where he's about to like hack into the system and try to turn the power back on?
Hold on to your butts.
That's what the guy says.
Oh, Biology Project.
Wow. That's a big one. There's a lot of like
Oh my goodness.
pseudo things that go on in
Yeah,
this deck.
but there's a lot of branching paths that Definition could go on here. On which of these cards to actually spend. Draws Clarkskin, though, this also has the added benefit of buffing this other Spellstone that he drew.
Time waits for no one.
And that's also true. It doesn't wait for anybody.
There's Mr. Waggle himself. Your Majesty.
I would definitely consider naturalizing at this stage. And I think it has much less to do with the fact that it's important to naturalize and much more to do with the fact that you are generating tempo, and at the same time you're cycling through the deck. Look, with second Auctioneer, with Togwaggle already found, I think Definition is in a pretty fantastic spot, and it's going to be tough for him, I think, to just absolutely fall out of this game.
Yeah.
The first 4 mana that Roger spends this turn is in some way probably killing an Auctioneer. Although I have found that at times to be fruitless, and leaving your opponent's Auctioneers in play can do work as well, which may be why Definition had decided to attack earlier in the game, is knowing that that can be counterplayed at the deck, actually leaving Auctioneers there and then taking too much damage from cycling.
Yeah.
I've seen that be a problem before. Albeit that's a bigger problem with Mechathune Druid than it is with this version.
So with 1 Naturalize used, things become a little bit weird in the late game. Drawing your deck, that's the easy part. Navigating that late game to kill your opponent is the difficult part with 1 Naturalize used. Because Hakar, you either need to hold on to the Spellstone to be able to kill the card, and then you can use Naturalize to get those bloods out. Because you can't leave yourself vulnerable to Spellbreaker on your card. You can't just play it and hope it dies. You need those 2 layers of things to happen.
I got some layers of things happening here for you. Definition has just got a lovely setup in this game. Yeah, it's also important to have the mindfulness to hang on to an Innervate. The second Innervate is not capable of being used, like, at all.
And he has to, again, I think he has to hold on to Innervate, Naturalize, and Spellstone.
Which, by proxy, also means Biology Project. Because you need to Hakar, Innervate, Biology Project to get 2 mana, Spellstone, and Naturalize. Is that right?
No, the Naturalize is saved for the Togwaggle to swap the bloods into your opponent's deck and then make them draw them to kill them.
Okay. Card getting burned, is that important?
No, he's got everything he needs.
Okay, that's why he's willing to burn a card.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now he's really got to think this through.
I mean, yeah, now is he fallen into like too tough of a spot? I mean, you're facing down 16 damage. I was thinking about the second Spellstone for a minute, and I didn't want to make the comment, so I was like, he already played a Spellstone, right? That was my head. And then you took that route and explained exactly why he's holding on to that Spellstone. So that is super important that he doesn't really want to use those tools. But honestly, like, I think you can get to a point where you don't necessarily need the Naturalize if you're swapping decks. Like, Roger is over 2 turns. Is he going to be able to kill you if you've staved off damage? And then number 2, how long does it take for Hakar to really churn in a situation like that?
Then he'd have to do it the other way around, which takes a lot more time.
Whoa, you can't just play a KOR. Now that I know you can't do.
Well, he can shuffle the Bloods in his deck now, but then thinning his deck is much more difficult.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. It's like, so this is accounting for the fact that he feels like he's being too pressured and needs to start taking action decisively on it.
All right, so his deck consists of now.
Wow, Definition clasping the hands. A Corrupted Blood drawn instantaneously as well.
That doesn't really matter.
Could that change the math on Roger hitting a percent, though?
I don't think it changes the math. The weird thing is that Definition now has to make sure his deck is only Bloods for somehow. So he needs to survive for. He needs to take 2 more turns of minion hits. The other option for last turn was to try and draw cards, but I don't think he has anything left in his deck that would deal with the Hooked Reaver.
This is where my debate comes in. I don't understand the necessity to hold on to a Naturalize if your opponent's deck is only Corrupted Bloods, or if your deck is only Corrupted Bloods. Once the Corrupted Bloods are there, Roger then has the onus of killing you, or the Corrupted Bloods will kill him.
Yeah, but it takes longer is the thing.
I don't think that matters. I think you need to get the time to do that first.
Okay, I see what you're talking about.
And I don't think he has the time now because he's taking 22 from a Hooked Reaver.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
So now...
Spreading Plague drawn, maybe you can do that.
Spreading Plague Barkskin.
Half the deck's Corrupted Bloods. And if you decide to Tog Waggle and then Naturalize, I think taking that hit might have changed the percent of the way this works. Because at 24 is a technical breakpoint. 25 is the breakpoint, rather. I apologize. Okay, well, we're getting
All right,
there.
so he pulled a card out of his deck. That's important.
Yeah, this is really important. I think Roger has a good chance to die here. I don't know the exact math, and I haven't charted this out myself.
Yeah, but the one card in the mix, it stops the chain is the thing.
Mind you, the deck shuffles. Yeah, I think he's dead. He's super dead.
Yeah, the deck shuffles, and he picked up the branching pad, so...
Yeah.
He got it.
Because then you take the fatigue from the Naturalize, and then you draw for your turn.
Yep.
So taking the hit on the Corrupted Blood didn't matter. I mean, look how much damage Roger's taking this turn, but Definition did have a plan here.
That's a very difficult match to navigate, and Definition finds himself with a victory.
In the way that it was navigated, yes.
Yeah.
I have actually never done it with my opponent's deck when I swap having cards left that aren't Corrupted Bloods.
And
that's
but
largely because I don't
you
have to practice it.
Yeah.
Definition has clearly done that at some point and clearly thought through that iteration.
Yeah.
And wasn't sure about it.
Well, I think the biggest thing there was him recognizing that he needed to draw a card with Wrath and basically not hit a Blood.
Yeah.
Because there was a chance that if he hit a Blood, yes, he would have swapped more, but there was a chance that 2 non-Bloods in a row would have stopped the chain
right.
for Roger in his draw sequence for the next couple turns with the Naturalize. So recognizing they would have enough mana to draw a card with Wrath, pull out a non-Blood from his deck, have enough mana with Biology Project to still Tog Naturalize, and do the math that that's a victory. Insane in the membrane.
It's complicated. Just like your Facebook relationship status.
That's not mine.
Touché. I was trying to be hip and young there. It didn't work, I guess.
Did not work.
It's for old people now, anyway.
Happily married. That's why I'm wearing the suspenders. Because I've given up.
I'm sorry, Karen. Game 3 is coming up. And we still have Odd Warrior in the pool for Definition, which is the tough deck for him to get through. And we just saw Roger on the deck that TJ and I are concerned about him getting through, which is the Even Warlock. I think that Definition has a pretty real chance to beat this with his particular Odd Warrior list
Light shall bring victory.
because he's brought the additional copy of Removal with Big Game Hunter and is playing the Carnivorous Cube and the Faceless Manipulator version. So there are times where you can Faceless one of your opponent's big minions and then Shield Slam it. And then you get to Cube, and that sets up a Brawl or a Flurry, which is often enough to seal the deal. Definition's queuing up his own Even Warlock this game, and it does feature a copy of Nerubian Unraveler, a card that is at times pretty troublesome for Priest. And Rogers brought the Cloning Gallery Priest, which is quite slim on minions, and thus, I think, a little bit better in this matchup.
Yeah, even Warlock, also a deck that just taps itself to low life totals, which means that you can end the game with a lot lower breakpoints. Sometimes even just play Velen on 10 and Mind Blast Holy Smite them. No fancy stuff necessary.
Yeah, so for Definition, you know, we might be nearing the end of like a life tap super aggressively train. I'd say at the points where Definition still needs particular cards, that's going to change. But right now, I'm looking at 3 back-to-back-to-back threats that could be good enough to get the job done.
Yeah, Roger does have answers to those threats. With Massive Spell for the Twilight Drake and Shadow or Death for the Mountain Giant.
Definition has instead thrown caution to the wind and says, I will not be stopped by this nonsense. I will play my big threats and attempt to kill my opponent as aggressively as possible,
Yeah,
which I probably should have guessed after game 1.
Yeah, but that's a Shadow or Death gone. He has seen the Shadow Visions, but if he's hand tracking well, he knows that that one copy of Shadow or Death that was played is the only one and came before the Shadow Visions, which means this Mountain Giant is happily alive. Look at him.
Kind of looks like Thanos.
A little bit.
It's the lines.
Kind of looks like a mountain giant.
Wow, you're smart.
Oh!
Brutal. Savage.
Wrecked.
Definition still with the Shroom Brewer in hand, so goes to 7. Ah, wow. The Shroom Brewer actually sets it up perfectly for a Mass Hysteria on the following turn as well.
Yep.
That's if Roger elects to attack, though. He's clearly thinking about this, and to me, the answer is very clearly attack. But you have to consider what like Homunculus Spellstone will look like. You know, the no attack thing is also like, you know, Spellbreaker is a bad deal for you. It's a pretty safe attack to make and just keep your opponent in a weak offensive spot.
Still got threats for days, perhaps even weeks.
Yeah, I am quite curious if maybe you can trade the Mountain Giant in this situation rather than attempt to heal it. It's just because of how open you are to Mass Hysteria at that point.
Yeah, that's the... it's whether or not he wants to reset, get rid of this Mountain Giant, and play Twilight Drake to have a guaranteed threat through Mass Hysteria.
We've been talking about how cold it is in the studio. I'm sorry to interrupt you. For like
possibilities.
possibly months at this point. We now have our first evidence of it. Roger just put on a jacket. It's freezing.
I'm wearing short sleeves. I feel good. Yeah. I do have an extra layer compared to most people. Well, this doesn't set it up perfectly for Mass Hysteria because there's an iteration where the Plated Beetle hits the Mountain Giant.
That's pretty perfect to me.
Well, you still got to deal with a 4/4. Which, it's the bane of Priest.
I feel like if you say it facetiously, it doesn't count towards the bingo. Oh, now he's got to deal with a 2-3. Mass Hysteria was great there.
It was good. I'll agree.
Very upset if that happens to me.
I think the big question here is Nerubian Unraveler timing for Definition. When do you play it?
An excellent question. I think it's as soon as you get some pressure compounding is really when, and that still seems quite far off.
This is Definition. This is going to tell a lot about what his game plan is, because if he Bone Mares, he rolls right into Shadow Reaper Anduin. I think it's 4 attack minion, 4 attack minion, go.
Yes, I mean, this is just simply like the best plan of attack, because Bone Mare represents burst and these do not. Typically, it's slower things first. And so for Roger, the fact that he doesn't have a coin means that this turn ends up operating a lot slower than he would like it to.
Yeah, Spellstone is just a Ziliax, I believe, at this stage. Radiant Spellstone is a Radiant Elemental in a Ziliax.
I would guess it's like Radiant Eternal Servitude maybe, but the Servitude's giving up some of the combo kill potential.
Yeah.
But the Spellstone, to me, because he has two of them, doesn't seem quite as aggressive of a notion. I mean, they nerfed Giggling Inventor to 7 mana. Why not Ziliax?
Hey. Not funny.
I just thought it was clever.
Nope.
Not funny.
Nope. How dare you?
How dare I what?
Just do it.
Do what?
Roger gonna Eternal Servitude here for the Ziliax. Go back to 30. And he's feeling okay. These are greater Diamond Spellstones now. The problem is he needs minions.
A thing to play.
I like things to play.
Yes, very much. I wonder why it would be the Ooze over exactly Mass Hysteria would be the reasoning.
I don't think that really matters. The outcomes are the same.
You're correct. So then it'd be holding on to 7/7? Does that really matter? Does the Ooze change anything in terms of where your combat sits?
No.
I personally am playing the Hooked Reaver because I have a Blood Reaver Gul'dan in my hand.
Yeah.
It's an awfully appealing looking Psychic Scream.
I think it's an awfully appealing looking Malagos.
That too.
You're not going to die. Your opponent either trades into it, and then they die.
What if they silence and play an Arubian Unraveler?
Yeah, that would be a reason not to play Malagos. That would be a great reason not to play Malagos.
I just saved TJ a ladder game later.
Yes, you did. Wow, that would have happened.
It's a Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Balls it up with Bone Mare, though.
Well, the Shadow Reaper Anduin will also kill the 3/2 thanks to the hero power.
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah. This is looking quite tough for Definition right now.
Yeah. Wasn't able to stick the board and protect it with Unraveler, and Roger now is actually closing in on lethal damage, whether it's a Malagos sticking or dying and rezzing with the Spellstone, or even just hero powering over a couple turns, and then Mind Blast plus Holy Smite. If he Shadow Reaper Anduin's now in hero powers, the next turn he would have
13.
Yeah.
3 hero powers, Mind Blast, Holy Smite. I'm interested in this Smite. That seems quite peculiar to me. I'm going to give that an I don't know about that, Teach.
Magic shall not save.
I think that's the way that Roger could get beat up in this game. However, seeing this sequence now makes me, believe that the Shadow Reaper Anduin might have been quite a brilliant hold.
Only way to deal with Nerubian Unraveler. He wasn't in any threat of dying. And now, even though Malagos is silenced, it's still a 4/12 that gets to fight.
Right.
Still got a Mind Blast in hand. If Malagos ever does die, he just gets to resurrect it.
Yeah, and the Blood Reaver Gul'dan is not juiced at this point. There's no Dread Infernal, there's one copy of Hooked Reaver, and there are no Vulgar Homunculus.
One of the Hooked Reavers was Psychic Scream back to the deck, you're correct. So Sun Fury Protector in Bone Mare to try and protect this life token.
Quick turn from Definition, though, who's quite confident in this Bone Mare, but I believe the only minion in Roger's deck is...
Felon?
I believe so? Unless there's another Radiant that I
think there's another Radiant.
Okay, there is another Radiant then.
Wait, no, Radiant died.
Yeah, there was a Radiant dead already, wasn't there?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're right, it's Felon.
So, let's attack here, and then shoot your guy, and then res. And then you can't die to what Definition has in the deck.
No, and then it's lethal because Mind Blast is 20 damage because you bring back a Radiant. Mind Blast costs 1. Oh, no, you don't have the Velen in the pool yet because you didn't summon it with Shadow Essence.
The point being, Roger's got everything.
He's good.
Here. Yeah, Definition he can't deliver a lethal blow in time. Can he kill the Malagos and have that do anything? I don't think so.
He actually can.
But will that change the impact of the game?
No, because then he just reses it again with the Greater Spellstone, and he has nothing on board because he has to Hellfire, trade the Bone Mare, and then Spellstone.
So here it is.
Yeah. Now you Hero Power, Shadow Essence, Hero Power. He plays Blood River Gul'dan. You still have the 20 damage combo because it's going to be Velen.
Oh,
It's gonna
boy.
die.
Are lost. Job done.
Well, that's game now. Velen dies.
Yep.
Res pool is...
Res pool is
Cannot-
Ziliax, Radiant Elemental, Malagos, Velen.
Yep. Roger up 2-1. Definition got all of his threats checked this game. Roger even with the Vivid Nightmare. Just to rub it in.
I would just do 40 damage. But not in the quarterfinal game, Admirable. No way, Jose.
Oh.
Roger takes a 2-1 lead in the series. That one seemed a lot closer than what it ended up at.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Definition was basically just a board sticking, a Nerubian Unraveler played from being very close to closing that one out. But as is the trend of this weekend, even Warlock continues to struggle, and Definition can't really afford for that to happen when that's not even the focal point of his lineup for Roger.
Right, and I would say that in the mirror match with even Warlock, that Roger is slightly favored with a copy of Stubborn Gastropod, where Definition has a copy of Plated Beetle instead. And then also in the 6-drop slot, Roger gets a -1 for that one because he has a second copy of Nerubian Unraveler. Definition does not. So basically a mirror match where there's one early tech card that could change things a lot.
Yeah, but still a lot of game left to play in this series. Roger on the verge of qualifying to the World Championship. Definition's gotta be feeling the pressure. We're gonna see how this series unfolds. We're gonna have to go to a quick break, but don't go anywhere. More HCT Winter Championship quarterfinals right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the HCT Winter Championship. I'm TJ, once again joined by the Admiral. That's Admirable.
Howdy.
Things are heating up here in this final quarterfinal. Roger and Definition both fighting for a spot in the semifinals.
And thus a spot at the World
Do
Championship.
you understand the brevity of the situation that's admirable?
I just said it.
This is a big deal.
It is.
I don't think you're taking this seriously enough.
What? Why? You're being so accusatory.
Big question here for Definition is, will he be able to bring this to a game 5? And then there's another question after that for Definition. Can he find a win with the Odd Warrior?
I think if Definition wins this game, that
He's favored.
he has an advantage, yeah. And
That is a tall task. And Roger has a Mountain Giant. Now, granted, he's on the play, not the coin. Definition is on the coin, also has a Mountain Giant. His Mountain Giant comes down first.
Okay, so big keys to look for.
Doomsayer.
Doomsayer or Stubborn Gastropod early for Roger will set the tone in his favor. If that's not the case, Definition has a slight lead but needs another threat to compound the issue.
They drew the same first 3 cards.
That is kind of weird. No Gastropod. One more turn for it. Homunculus is a good pickup as well. That blocks the Mountain Giant for a turn.
Homunculus is a good pickup, and he can still play his Mountain Giant on curve. But also, you can look at it from a different perspective. By playing the Vulgar Homunculus, you essentially let Mountain Giant 2-for-1 you. Because you're not going to hit face in that situation when you're tempted with the option of trading into a Mountain Giant, because you don't want to activate their Hooked Reavers.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah.
There is a certain degree that I'm worried about it too, and you know, when I don't have any Spellstones in hand, that is usually one of those degrees. That tap from Roger is a nod almost specifically to drawing a second Mountain Giant and getting aggressive.
Yeah, but after this Mountain Giant, both players kind of find themselves in a little bit of a weird spot here. Honestly, the play that I like the best, even though it sounds weird, is trade over the Mountain Giant, heal Roger's face with the Shroom Brewer.
Heal Roger's face.
Heal Roger's face with
Okay.
the Shroom Brewer.
I dislike healing Roger's face because he has 8 life taps to go until he's into Hooked Reaver's range.
That can get pretty quick, and at any point, the way you win this matchup, unless you just get a good early board lead, is oftentimes by just getting more powerful minions online sooner and taking complete control of the game.
Okay, well, I would like to just heal the Acidic Swamp Ooze if we're going to heal Roger's face. If the game plan is to not heal ourselves so that we get to Hooked Reaver, I would rather heal a minion uselessly than heal my opponent's face in that instance, because damage matters in this matchup.
The other greedy play is to trade over the Acidic Swamp Ooze,
which is a play that I very detest.
Yeah.
I've told you this before, I am an Even Warlock elitist, and Definition is going to heal Roger's face. I personally dislike it, but there are merits to it. He clearly plans to play a super defensive game now and keep Roger from ever getting value from Hooked Reaver. So Definition's game plan is to eliminate threats from Roger right now. That's where he's seated. I have done that at times, but usually when I do that, I already have Gul'dan available. And when I don't have Gul'dan available, I'm much less comfortable executing that game plan.
Even Warlock, the mirror matchup, reminds me of if you combined, or let me start over.
Okay.
The Even Warlock mirror matchup is if, in the Olympics, if in the 100-meter sprint, if instead of a photo finish when 2 players are really close, if they thought 2 players were really close, they just made them run a marathon to break the tie instead. Because it's basically just them sprinting to see if someone can land 2 Mountain Giants while the other player doesn't. And if they don't do that, then it goes pretty long.
Yeah, that is, I'd say, a pretty typical case for it. And when Roger sees the heal to his own face, he stops attacking Definition, which makes me wonder, should you have attacked him in the first place?
Probably not.
It feels to me like the weight of the situation this whole tournament has been on Roger's shoulders. And at some point, he has reminded himself within the matchup, don't autopilot, even though that's very comfortable. You need to stop and think about things. I don't blame him for autopiloting sometimes. Everybody does that.
I feel like Roger's card quality is just a ways above Definitions.
I would definitely consider it superior right now.
Just Lich King on 8, if you're in this kind of battle where you're going back and forth, trading off boards, trying to land the threat that sticks.
Yeah.
Lich King is like the ultimate trump card in that situation because it's a value generator. It's also just the biggest minion in the deck outside of Mountain Giant.
Yeah, it's honestly like the reason I have a problem with the coin usage of Definition is you get sunk into a situation where your opponent literally always gets to Lich King or Bone Mare before you get access to 8 mana. And that's one of the ways that you outright lose the game. And now there's not a way to answer this Dread Infernal. You have a 4-1 in play, and your best play into it is, again, Greymane, which is set up to be Spellstoned in his perspective. So that's another way he loses the game, is if Roger has a Spellstone and then pretty much anything to put on the board.
This curse has become our greatest strength.
Genjamin it is. But there is no Spellstone for Roger.
No, so he can't capitalize on this.
10 cards in hand means you have to play one first before you tap.
But he's in line to either land a Bone Mare or a Lich King. That's not a good hand. But in tough times like this,
that's a good hand.
Okay, all of a sudden.
That's a major point of disruption for Definition, where Roger would normally just be able to jam a Lich King down and not worry much about it, and now instead, I'm looking towards a couple different plays where it's either Bone Mare and trade, or it's some sort of Hellfire and Hooked Reaver play.
Yeah, Hellfire Hooked Reaver.
The problem is the Hellfire Hooked Reaver gives your opponent a way to start actually just blowing up all your cards and maybe actually recover from a situation. I personally like the Bone Mare because you can Bone Mare the 2/3 and actually consider going face in that measure because you have Spellbreaker in your hand. So if Definition's plan is then just Hooked Reaver after that, you have Spellbreaker to bust through it. But at the same time, if it's double Hooked Reaver, you get punished for that. It's just the situations carry so much weight to them that it's difficult to like fully execute something to a big degree. So I think if I'm in Roger's spot, I'm Bone Marrying the Shroom Brewer and trading. So that way I have 7 attacks set up on board. I'm going to chip away for 2, which is outside the range of a weird life tap situation. And then I'm going to try to lean on my lead.
Definition effectively drawing all the cards in the matchup that you just don't want to see. Outside of the Mountain Giant last turn, his hand has very little proactive plays.
Yeah.
It's all reactive, which means that when you're in a situation like this...
Whoa, that was quick. I don't know about that one. That's probably enough to do it. This could be like a weird setup for a Defile play that Definition has in mind. Oh, Roger.
You got to pace yourself. You're only on like mile 11 of this marathon.
Possibilities.
Pacing himself.
Is there a reason to not trade Lich King here? Am I losing my mind?
Maybe a burn. If he does have some way to take care of Lich King, then
What takes care of Lich King? You have no minions.
Hellfire Spellstone. Then you burn Blood River Ghoul.
Then you double Hooked Reaver. This is good too.
I think this is a really good middle ground.
I personally wanted the Lich King in play. Burning Blood Reaver Gul'dan a real threat though, so I can't criticize. This is good.
Now Definition's in the same spot, but instead of staring at a 3-2 and a 4-4, he's staring at a 7-7, a 5-5, and a 4-4.
Yeah, you also don't want to play Lich King into your opponent just blowing it up. Like, if you know your opponent's going to blow it up, it's very different than if your opponent has to spend a lot of stuff to blow it up. Oh, boy.
Trade Hooked Reaver, the Ruby Unraveler.
That's probably pretty close to game.
I feel like you've said that every turn.
I didn't say it last turn. I didn't say it the turn before that. I didn't say it the turn before that.
Yeah, but the turn before that,
I'm pretty sure this is the first time I've said it.
It could be.
So now you're just making stuff up.
Pretty sure I've casted
You're ticking me off now.
2 roads to El Paso.
Oh, we're going to get it.
To the traitor king.
Wait a gosh darn second.
out of time.
This does offer some full clear potential.
It's got to be a defile here.
This definition just doesn't have much life left to work with.
Yeah, you could trade Hellfire Defile.
That uses all 10 mana.
All 10 mana. Cedes full initiative over to Roger.
That's the sound that definition's making in his head right now.
But you don't have a gosh darn choice.
You always have a choice, TJ. Maybe not if you want to accomplish your goal of winning the game. But Roger is pretty firmly in full control now. This is why, in my opinion, you heal your own face.
Now we got a Lich King Acidic Swamp Ooze play. And Definition currently has no answer. His answer to Lich King is double Hooked Reaver and Prey. He now has an answer to Lich King. But again, it takes up his whole turn. He gets to throw a Plated Beetle alongside of it.
Yeah, honestly, the Spellstone is probably the biggest draw in the deck outside of maybe a Hellfire, because it accomplishes pretty close to the same thing. And that honestly might be enough to get Definition out of this. So now, oh wow, that's a good draw. Just being able to have access to Doomsayer is such an important mechanism.
He's got 14 damage this turn with the Death Coil. That Death Coil,
Yeah, that's a big one too.
most likely going to be the X factor in this game. He's also got Spellbreaker. I think this is lights out. Now I can officially say I think we're close to game over here.
Definition goes face. It's a Spellbreaker trade.
Hooked Reaver. Yeah, he's dead. He goes up to 16 by trading in. There's 9 on board. He can Spellbreaker, Hellfire, Death Coil.
Because the 20 from the double Hellfire and Death Coil. Yep.
Your magic shall not save you.
There's got to be a Defile here.
There is a Defile here.
Well, how did we not spot?
And he lands a Hooked Reaver. There's always a Defile.
That's like always the thing we're looking for. Why did we stop looking for it suddenly?
He's not dead.
Not only is he not dead, Roger just doesn't have very good pressure to add this turn.
Definition, though, out of healing.
So many possibilities.
This is definitely the play to make in the face of this.
The end is coming!
If you're going to kill something, you need to buy back initiative. Definition needs to really think about playing either a Hooked Reaver or a Lich King or life tapping, and then reconsidering doing one of those things. Because he's going to need Blood Reaver Gul'dan. And if he needs Blood Reaver Gul'dan, I'm thinking you'd probably need another Hooked Reaver in the pool just to get something on board for free. It's neither of those plays.
Still not much pressure, though, for Roger. Nerubian Unraveler limits his own ability to burst. Blood River Gul'dan 1 card away. He's just going to set up the Unraveler. Blood River Gul'dan picked up.
Wow. Wow.
He's only played a Hooked Reaver. Has he played a Vulgar Homunculus?
Oh, what? Okay. Stop and think. Blood River Gul'dan is the best card in the deck. That needs to be played right now. That absolutely needs to be played. You need to get that hero power online. If you play your Blood Reaver Gul'dan second, you are done. This is the I talked about this earlier in the tournament too. Throwing away Hooked Reavers to get extra development for Gul'dan. If you know that Gul'dan's your draw, do that.
But if he plays Lich King, then Roger won't want to play Blood River Gul'dan. That's the other side of that coin.
That is true. I mean, the pressure threat on the other side is very real.
And now, because Roger, his only threat really to play was Nerubian Unraveler, he doesn't have the ability to Spellbreaker and push this damage.
I still want to play Blood Reaver Gul'dan. I think giving up a second Lich King card here is not the hugest deal in the world.
Now there's a potential. Do we have to think about fatigue at all? Because Roger's tapped for more cards. This also sets up lethal. He's got Bone Mare in hand.
Well, there's 2 Vulgar Homunculus.
If he didn't have Blood River Gul'dan is what I was saying.
Oh, yeah,
He
I see what you're
forces Roger to either Blood River Gul'dan and let his Lich King live another turn.
And now that sets up lethal.
By a lot.
This is a hard game.
I think Definition might be dead. I think both of his Vulgar Homunculus are in the bottom 6, so he doesn't have that taunt wall to put in the way with Blood River Gul'dan. What could even Death Grip?
I wonder.
Almost out of time.
I think the key was finding an impactful Lich King card. And there's no Defiles left.
Well, I don't even know what Lich King card would have been impactful enough. With double Spellbreaker in hand, 2 taunts in the way doesn't mean anything. Puts on the Doomsayer, but that's not going to do a darn thing. Which means that Roger is going to end this game, take the series 3-1, and move on to the top 4 with a spot at the World Championship.
Patience to hold on to Spellbreakers the entire time as well. He had the aggressive initiative, and thus he didn't need to play them. He could continue to hold them as a threat. And it's a weird game plan, but it's the trade, the trade, the trade, the trade, over and over again, right until your opponent stumbles and you have Spellbreakers to bust through. And that is the reason why Spellbreakers are in there, is to bust through taunts. So I think Roger played that game pretty fantastically, all things considered.
Yeah.
And even going first and not having the initial Mountain Giant ended up being, overall his outcome, which I think is a pretty big statement.